What's up, y'all? My name is T. Shaw, and this is Brewin Black Podcast, where the contents we serve you is authentic, vulnerable, and relatable. That means we serve you with no cream and no sugar.
I guess I like my coffee black.
What's up, everyone? My name is Scholar P, pronouns he, him, his.
And it's your boy T. Shaw, pronouns he, him, his.
And this is Brewin Black Podcast, your favorite podcast for those who like their subjects, like we like our topics.
Black. And before we hop into the show, we're going to do our land acknowledgments. This is the land of the Gabrielino and the Tongva. This is stolen land. This is colonized land. We will always, always, always pay those respects. And today, it's a bit of a heavier topic. Just this past week, the woman's name is Nicole Linton. There was a extremely tragic accident. I believe 5 or 6 people lost their lives. It's been a very sensationalized story over the last few days, over the past week. A young mother lost her whole family. So not only was she killed, but her unborn baby that was about 8 months old was lost. The father of those children was also lost, and as well as their toddler. And I also believe there were 2 other young women that haven't been identified yet that was lost in this crash. And it's spun the media cycle. It spun the media cycle over the last few days. And I think by the time this episode airs, people will still be talking about it. Right now, she was denied bail, and I think her bail now has been set at a little less than $500,000. She is facing some murder charges as well as vehicular manslaughter, and she faces up to 90 years in prison. So today, I think it's a perfect way to kind of have a conversation about what do we think of when we think of punishment? What do we think of when we think of rehabilitation? And how can we judge a case like this? One of our past episodes, we talked about abolition, and we've talked about abolition a number of times. But I think this is a good case to kind of think about, like, how things like this happens. And just some context. So I think the current narrative, and maybe by the time this episode airs, it will be understood that Nicole Linton was not under any influence of drugs and alcohol. I think that's an important thing. When it first came out, there was a media story that said, a young woman was interviewed and said, yeah, like I was hanging out with her and she got a call and she was fighting with her boyfriend and we was drinking and she drove off. We found out that that's misinformation and that was a lie. Somebody just offered the news story and was looking for clout on news. Thought it was funny, and I can't imagine what a situation so tragic that they would be willing to lie like that. Right. But I think that information colors how we saw her, right? I think that was the context. It's like, oh, she was extremely reckless. She was trying to commit suicide because she was upset, and she wanted to take people out with her. So if you Google her name, if you search her name up on Twitter or Instagram, you'll see a lot of people saying she needs to be put under the jail. She doesn't even deserve to go to jail. She should be killed. I've seen somebody say she should be hanged, which has a lot of racialized undertones that made me feel uncomfortable. But a lot of people feel like she deserves to rot in prison, or she shouldn't have a life. But I think just knowing and uncovering more information, and you can look this up at LA Times and a number of different sources, she's struggled with mental health problems. She's been in about 13 accidents over the last couple years. So there's a lot of things at play. She's an ICU nurse. So I think there's a lot of things that layer on and that make this conversation so difficult. But Scholar P, I guess I just want to hear about your initial thoughts, and where were you when you heard the news first?
I was actually at a happy hour doing a late birthday celebration with some friends, and they it was crazy because, mind you, I'm like maybe 3 or 4 drinks in at this point. And like after that, I was just scared. I was just scared. Like I went in my car and just slept. And I was like, I just want to make sure when I get back on the road, like I'm safe, I'm good. Cause I was just like, you can't take no risks, right? Like it's, and I think that's important to say because I think that, I think there's so many people who have gotten in the car, whether you were drunk out of your mind or buzzed or whatever, or even if you were just super upset, even if you were looking at your phone. So many of us do so many things, so many reckless things behind the wheel, and we're just fortunate that it didn't cause the deaths of anybody or harm anybody, right? But yeah, I think my initial thoughts were, dang, like that's so sad. I was devastated for those families, like, and it just, and I think that like you, I had heard the false news stories first, so I was like, oh, under the influence, let me watch what I'm doing, da 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 da. But now to hear that it's misinformation, I don't even know if it almost makes me feel, I don't know if that's better or worse,
That's
to
fair.
be honest.
That's fair.
Like, if you were sober and you were going as fast as you were going, there's no way you didn't think you were going to hit somebody or harm somebody else. So then it complicates it even more versus, oh, you were drinking, you had no idea what was going on, you shouldn't have been behind the wheel, but like, at least you didn't, go that fast for nothing. I don't know. There's no right or wrong way to feel about whether she was under the influence of anything or not. Like, at the end of the day, those people are still gone forever. And now it's like, you're left here. And I hear this a lot from friends. Like, usually when this type of stuff happens, like, you are the one who survives.
Yeah.
Like, and you got to live with that guilt and the scrutiny for the rest of your life.
That's fact.
Right. So, but what about you?
Yeah, I was actually, I had just picked up my girlfriend, and I had from the airport, and I had dropped her off at her mom's house. I live in Inglewood. Her mother lives in Inglewood, so I live we're about 2 blocks away from it now. I live maybe about 4 blocks away. And when they showed me the video, like I was just so like shook. You know what I mean? Like, if you see the speed in which this car was driving, like, you're like, what is going on? You know what I mean? And I understand what you mean. It's like, well, if there isn't alcohol in play, because that makes it make more sense. Right now, it makes no sense. And I think that that's the scariest part. But I think knowing that this person dealt with mental health issues and this has happened 13 times, not to this degree, right? There tells me that there's something going on, right? And I think that this person shouldn't be behind the wheel. But also, like, reading about in the LA Times, it's like this person may have been on medication but off medication at that point. Because if it's not alcohol, no one in their right mind drives that fast. I mean, in LA, people be speeding. Don't get me wrong, but we talking about
this is midday traffic.
Yeah,
like
through a busy intersection, going about 100 miles per hour.
Yeah.
So there's something going on mentally there that seems like suicide, but I think we don't have enough to say, like, this person could have been asleep at the wheel. This person could have, like, there's so many different things. They said she was getting off work from the hospital. Maybe there was something tragic happened at the hospital, threw you in a loop. You already have mental health issues and you fly across, not even thinking. So this is not to make excuses, but this is to try to get some type of understanding. And I think that the problem that I saw when I looked into this case is that there was no understanding. It's just that this person is a monster and this person is evil. And I understand, based on like the media coverage of this, like, it's been sensationalized. All we've heard about this, we haven't heard about the 2 other women that lost their lives. They have been unidentified and there hasn't been any coverage. But I've seen maybe 5 different news outlets cover the young family that was lost, focusing on the unborn child, and that unborn child was about 30 days away from being born, that there was a toddler that was lost, right? We see the impact on this young family and we feel things, right? And when we feel those things, we want punishment, and we want to see someone burn because they're a monster. And I think that for me, it took me a step back, because the first thing you think of when you see a video like that is like, oh, this person's a monster. But it's like, I want to know how we got there. So then I think my next question for us is like, how is something like this punished? Do you think that 90 years in prison is justified? Because it might easily, based on the news coverage and how people feel right now, they might slap her with the book. And do you think 90 years is appropriate?
Like, appropriate, that's such an interesting word, right? Like, I think what I'm thinking about is like, what good will it do in terms of preventative measures? Because, like, once again, like you said before, she was in 13 accidents. How's she behind the wheel to begin with? You have you might be going through certain mental health things. Like, once again, how'd you get there? Then, like, you know, because even before the show, I was thinking about like, when was America at its lowest points in terms of like, you know, accidents such as this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, not knowing now that she wasn't, you know, allegedly under the influence, that, you know, even when I'm thinking about that, like, when did we have our lowest percentage of drunk driving or under the influence accidents, things of that nature? Because I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking at, we're mad at this monster, this quote unquote monster, but while we're thinking about that, what we also have to be thinking about is, if we really love those families, if we really love the people who we were lost, we got to make sure more people don't end up like them,
Mm-hmm.
right? And like, how? So that's why the how do we get there is so important. And then you got to think about, okay, well, is there any way that like she can be of use to society? I remember there was this
Mm-hmm.
guy in North Carolina who killed a guy, but he was definitely under the influence, drunk.
Mm-hmm.
So like, of course they revoked his license, whatever. But like, he went to school speaking about his incident to like teenagers, trying to encourage them, right? And so I'm thinking about, what use can this woman be to society, because her life is tarnished now,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Like, she's already suffering in terms of public opinion in a way that, like, I don't know, is that redeemable? So her life
Mm-hmm.
is altered that way already. So like, how can she be of use to society and be helpful in preventing the next group of families, a group of people from, you know, losing their lives?
Mm-hmm.
So that, I think that's what I think about. The 90 years, I mean, I guess, like, I don't know, like, I just don't know what that does for all of us, like,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And we had a conversation that I won't bring up here, but I think that when we think about what vengeance really looks like,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I'm saying? I think that, one, you'll find that like, you're never going to be satisfied no matter
Mm-hmm.
what. And then I think, two, true vengeance doesn't necessarily mean that it's actually going to be make life better for society or prevent more of this stuff from
Mm-hmm.
happening. So I'm just trying to figure out, like, 90 years of prison is going to do
What
what?
exactly? Okay.
Right? What about you?
Yeah, I really agree. I think 90 is excessive, right? 90 is just like it's an example. It's like, oh yeah, we're gonna punish her because it's gonna make us all feel better in this moment. Because we feel like that's maybe what justice is. And I think, again, when I am diving into abolitionist work, I come to those same questions that you're coming to, right? It's like, how can we prevent this? It's like, punishment, it just makes us really feel good, but is that really justice? Like, is that really gonna change anything? Because again, how do we get here? And how do we stop someone else from becoming Nicole Linton? Because on the surface, she's a very successful woman. She's a traveling nurse, living in Houston, living in LA, going to Hawaii, and working in the ICU. Like, we know how hard it is to get a nursing degree. She's no dummy. You know
Right.
what I mean? So how does someone that is so successful get to this point where they've altered the lives of multiple families?
Right.
So that's what I want to know. Someone on the internet was talking about how, yes, she needs to serve this time because that's what accountability is. But I think we've made prison and accountability like synonymous. Like, I don't think punishment and accountability are always the same thing. Don't get me wrong. Like, I think of like when I'm training my dog, right? He does things like he'll bark at other dogs across the street, and sometimes he'll try to run across the street. And sometimes I get so frustrated, I'll lock the leash and I'll like yank him back.
Right.
But he doesn't understand that. You know what I mean? Like, no, I could hit him on his butt. Like, it's like when people's dogs like pee on something and they drag their face in the pee.
Right.
They don't understand that. Punishment in that way doesn't mean much, right? Like, when someone is abused, like, they're just trying to avoid punishment, but they don't know the right thing to do. So I think more than anything, it's like, how do we change something like this? It's like, maybe we need to get some public transportation. Maybe if there was public transportation, this woman wouldn't be driving.
Right.
We could easily take away her license, be like, hey, you're not fit to drive. Just like some older people that may not need to be on the road in LA, right? Because they're a danger to themselves and to us on the road. Like, maybe if we had some real public transportation, some real bus system that worked in LA, like some other countries, like people in other countries take trains, they take buses. They navigate, they bike, but that's too dangerous here. Like, it said that she lived only a few miles away from the hospital, and that was her normal route. But like a Uber will cost way too much.
Right.
Like a Uber going, I mean, you know, a Uber
Yeah.
going about 2 miles here, $27. What?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
What?
For sure.
Prime time. So
Yeah.
I think I'm geared toward more solutions. I can't get away from that. She probably needs some type of punishment, but no punishment we give her will be worse than the punishment she's giving herself. If y'all seen pictures of this woman, like, she looks distraught. She does not look well. So I think, like, as a human being, like, she's no monster in the sense that, like, she has to live with what she's done. And I think that that's the biggest punishment you can give somebody. You know what I mean? Now, how do you work through that? And how can we, like, change this for society? I think that that's the bigger question for me.
Yeah, it's about honoring the legacy. I'll play devil's advocate just for us, right?
Yeah,
right?
do it. Because I know a bunch of people gonna feel that way.
Right. So so there is a perspective of like, okay, well, if this is my family, because I know my mom and my brother have both been hit by, have been in accidents, multiple accidents each, where it's not their fault. Right. And like, if I would have lost one of them, you know what I'm saying? Like, knock on wood, right? Like, if I would have lost one of them, it would have been like, all right, well, something has to happen because, like, you actually did, like, you know,
took my family.
Yeah, you and it's like they don't get anything back. Like they like you can actually be alive and redeem yourself. You know what I'm saying? This woman, Nicole, could actually live a life, you know, working on policies to change certain things. You know, I think about there are cars that have like breathalyzers in them and you have to breathe into the freaking start. Like we haven't even like explored those types of things in the automotive industry and making that a more normal thing, because people aren't going to stop doing whatever they do and then thinking they can get behind the wheel. People aren't gonna stop doing that.
That's
like,
true.
You know,
true.
we got friends. Some of us have like done that stuff before. It's like, I'm not the best to drive, but I can make it. Like, I'm confident enough in my ability. So like, she can spend her life like really dedicating herself to that cause. But for the family that lost everything, you know what I'm saying? Like, a whole family is not here no more. So like, I start to think about like you said, accountability doesn't necessarily mean getting off scot-free, but how can you make someone feel it for the rest of their lives and still have some dignity in their lives, right? And
I feel that.
So like, you know, her license being revoked, is she not allowed to go to certain places? Does she have to, like, you know, have this lifetime contract with the organization where she goes and she speaks about these things and, you know, lobbies for certain laws to like make sure these types of things don't happen? And like, what do restrictions on someone's life look like after you do something like that, right?
Absolutely.
And so punishment versus restrictions versus accountability is like where I'm at. But like, you know, I want you not to imagine your actual family. As a matter of fact, I'll say you have three brothers. You have three brothers and an uncle. Because you know, we love your family. We're not gonna put you in a real life situation. But you got three brothers. They've been taken by someone driving just like Nicole was. What is your reaction?
I think in the moment it is vengeance, right? I think that's a natural human reaction, right? And it makes sense. I think that makes a lot of sense. But I also think, based on what I know now, is that like that won't feel any better after, right?
Right.
Like, it will feel good in that moment, but I can't imagine that that'll really help me. I think that we want people to be punished, right? Like, I think that that's really, it's such a natural reaction. It's like, no, you got me fucked up. You got to suffer too. I think about even this Emmitt Till situation right now, right? We think about this older white woman. The grand jury decided not to indict her. Shit pisses me off. I'm like, don't let me find her. I'm going to slap the taste out her mouth. You know what I mean? Like, because like, nah, nigga, you need to suffer.
Yeah.
But I understand that that's toxic too. And it's not, I think even if they put her in prison, we're not getting shit from that.
And we were having this conversation before the show. I said, if you really want to punish her, you need to memorialize her as the villain that she is.
Absolutely.
And let her and her children and her children's children deal with, your grandmother's the one who got a little boy killed. Massacred. Like, stop playing. And I think, you know, Nicole might actually become the face of like, and the funny thing is, even though she wasn't drunk driving, like, that was the narrative that was circulating for a second. So she's gonna become some type of crazy face for that too. But there's not a win-win situation. There's not a perfect situation. But like, you could also make the case that a lot of people who go in for stuff to go into prison hardens them up even more.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, and then when they come out, they're actually worse for society. Like, going back to punishment, sometimes people try to avoid punishment without knowing why what they did was wrong. But then sometimes people are like, oh, I can handle the punishment. So like, I'll do whatever now because I'm tough enough to handle the punishment.
Absolutely.
So like, the punishment don't mean nothing. Like, you can put me in jail. You got people serving life right now because they won't snitch. You know what I'm saying? Or like they did something based off the morals of respect, and they're like, yes, I will sit in a prison and rot for the rest of my life based off principle.
Yeah.
So at some point, principles for a lot of people become much more significant than whatever the punishment is. So like, there has to be some rehabilitation factor, and like, I don't know, you put this woman in prison for 90 years just for her to like be supporting the prison economy and making these panties for some fucking corporation.
Working for Victoria's Secret or
like,
Hobby Lobby.
Like, I don't, the use of that isn't, you know, it doesn't necessarily celebrate the legacy of the lives that were lost or do something to prevent that from happening again. Because like I said, people aren't going to stop being mad. Let's say people are mad. People with mental health issues aren't going to stop, you know, being behind the wheel. You know what I'm saying? People who drink, who smoke, who on ecstasy, who on all that, they're still going to get behind the wheel. So like, what are we doing as a society to make sure it's the preventative measures are taking place?
Exactly.
That's the bigger conversation. I'm not going to say it's like, you know, the lives that were lost don't matter, but that's the real celebration, making sure that like, yes, we suffered, but do we want people to continue to suffer? Now, with that being said, if it was my family and I was at the courthouse when they were sentencing her, yeah, I'm gonna feel away.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely.
But at the end of the day, like,
you're gonna celebrate,
right? Well, at the end of the day, the type of vengeance that I consider vengeance is a little different.
You said an eye for an eye.
Yeah, well, I can't even say it on the podcast. Vengeance to me looks way different. I'm a little bit more extreme with mine, but it's not. But all it does is create more hurt and more problems for people. You know what I'm saying? Like even, you know, people have gotten, you know, murked out here in LA, and like whole families and communities have suffered and people have lost lives and this, that, the third. Like, we don't necessarily understand what vengeance truly is. Yeah. And even people who say they do when they actually go about doing it, it doesn't make shit better. Yeah. Like, all of the people are still lost. So
violence begets violence, right? Harm begets harm. I love what you said. It's like somebody can go into prison and may not even really deserve it, but they come out much harder than they were, right? Yeah. Because that's a monsters university. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, they're getting a degree in really how to survive in the worst conditions that we can create for a human society. But I just want to kind of go back to what you were saying, is like, we need to be creative in our solutions, right? Like, instead of trying to indict that woman, like, she at the end of her life, that does nothing for us. But like, let's maybe tax her estate, right? Let's pull all of her assets, right? Like, you need that shit is going into some type of fund. That shit is going to Emmitt Till's family. That's reparations, right? We need to be creative with our solutions. Right. And I think what you were saying is like, we need policy fixes, right? Like, we know people drunk drive. People been drunk driving since shit, like, I don't know, when was prohibition? You know what I mean? Like, so with that in mind, and knowing that there are extreme punishments and people have to take classes, people still do these things because things in their life push them to drink and then drive home because they don't have the means or the resources to do so. Yeah. But if there were Ubers just available for free for people to take, if they were drinking, like, more people would do that than not. Some people would still want to drive, but then we could hold them accountable because it's like, you had other options. We need to make sure that people have other options. And I think that that's the thing. And it's like, we as a society need more creative solutions to stop people. And then when we're getting to the punishments, it makes more sense because we can look at things as a case-by-case basis. So as we're closing out, I hope y'all enjoyed the conversation. I know many of y'all might not agree, right? Like, nah, let her burn. Because that's how a lot of people will feel. It's like, she let these families burn. She made their car explode, right? But I think that there is so much context and nuance into these conversations that make it hard. So as we're closing out, I want y'all to consider this as this story is going to unfold. By the time this episode comes out, you might have even heard the verdict because this is kind of being pushed out. But maybe not. But I just want us to start to have some type of compassion for us as individuals, because that's the only thing that's going to let us progress, right? Like, just like you said, like, if it was someone in my family harmed, I would want that same vengeance, right? Because it's what we don't feel like we need to get right. Like,
Right.
I got to get my lick back. But it's like, that's not what makes us better. That's not what makes us grow. That keeps us there. And it's like, in some ways, as society, we have to push past that point. I understand how we can feel that as people, but like, with all of us just spectating and observing incidences like this, I think cultivating some type of grace is the only way we can go.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and just for clarification, y'all, we're not saying that there shouldn't be some type of, consequences, some things that she has to deal with,
She might even deserve a few years in a prison. You know what I mean?
Yeah, or something
some
that
type,
actually,
some type of home.
Yeah, or
some
something that actually
rehabilitation.
rehabilitates, right?
Exactly.
Where you're not,
exactly. Mental health institution.
Yeah, because I think just one quick thing. Most of y'all who are talking about throw her in prison for 90 years, y'all wouldn't survive a week. Like, if we're not, like, we don't. It's not, prison is not some, be in bars for 2 hours. It's different.
Mm-hmm.
It's different. It's, trust me when I say, people go through stuff in there that changes them forever, that was never a part of original sentencing or rehabilitation. So, like, keep that in mind. But yeah, like you said before, this is more so about creative solutions. And if you want to honor the legacy of these people, like, figuring out ways to make sure there won't be more of them, or reduce the number of these types of tragedies in the future.
Yeah. So as we close out, keep the coffee black. Peace, and we'll see y'all soon.